Hello and welcome to the Effective Literacy Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I'm Anna.
And we are excited to have you with us today. If you've been listening to our previous episodes, you know Anna and I are educators, and we share a passion for reading and all things literacy. We know that literacy opens doors to reading and language skills through meaningful engagement. And we've recently noticed an escalation of research and opinions around what are the best practices when it comes to reading instruction, specifically the role of phonics in reading instruction. To better understand the newest research, we are interviewing experts from across the nation with extensive knowledge in literacy and multilingual education to discuss how to support our students, specifically our multilingual learners, in becoming literate individuals by the time they graduate from our educational system.
So today is a little different. Victoria and I, we've been in education collectively for over 40 years. And given that we've worked together, we know that when we go to a conference or read a new theory book, it's really important that we have an opportunity to talk with each other and to make meaning, kind of process what we've learned through those experiences. We are going to make an effort on centering these episodes on how these interviews help us to better understand literacy and how they stretch our thinking. So today we're going to make meaning of our conversations with Nicole Knight and Alexandra Guilamo. So that's definitely stretching our thinking. And if you haven't listened to those episodes, you might want to go back and take a listen before you listen to this one. And I think sometimes in our meaning making episodes, we say, or you can just listen to the meaning making. But both of those interviews had some really pivotal kind of new thoughts or definitely stretched our thinking. So in this meaning making episode, I definitely would recommend that you go back and listen. But, we're not going to bust you around totally.
Not totally.
All
right. So our meaning making episodes, we like to start off with really talking about what are we still thinking about and how do these episodes help us better understand literacy? So Anna, I guess I'm going to start with you on this one.
Okay. So what am I still thinking about? Do you guys know that I am a site principal? And so for me, I'm always thinking about our interviews through the lens of how can I take this information and really apply it to the classroom teacher, to our specific students. And I think while I'm at a monolingual school right now, of course, we still have multilingual learners. So I'm always thinking through that lens. And one of the big takeaways as I went back and listened to the episodes again is thinking about the power of transfer and how we can, regardless of, what our program is, if we're a dual language setting or a monolingual setting, how we can use that power of transfer to really give students a tool to use in their different language settings as kind of a key to unlocking not only their expressive language, but also their receptive if they're trying to make meaning of a situation or of a text. So I think that power of transfer, we've been talking about transfer and translanguaging and the differences between decoding, but putting all of these things together for me really makes me think about how teachers can give students a tool to maneuver through language opportunities without having to wait for teachers to teach them how to use specific language or what the language they need to use from whatever word bank versus if they have this tool of transfer. And for me, the big thing that Alexandra talked about was the meta-linguistic awareness. And I wrote this down because this is my big takeaway from her was if we were to say to kids, and I love how she said it in this language, that words are patterns that do specific things at specific times. And that same thing happens across languages. That sentence to me is like a huge key for kiddos, whether they're in second grade or really helpful, I'm thinking in the secondary world of if you know those patterns and we teach you what those patterns are, then you don't have to wait for us to teach you the actual words or the phrases. You have the key in the patterns. And so then you can figure that out and have something in your own toolbox rather than wait to be taught that in like a specific ELD class or something.
So I'm going to try to phrase what I hear you saying. What I hear you saying is that the idea of we as educators need to put the meta-linguistic awareness on the front burner.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to embrace that in our classrooms, and not only embrace it, but encourage it and talk about it, and have students be thinking about how are we using language and how is this language similar.
For sure. And I think in the past few years, we've spent a lot of time thinking about metacognition. How am I thinking about my thinking? How am I thinking about my thinking? And that's a really great shift for us, right? Because then again, that puts the power back into the students' hands. How am I thinking about what I just learned? What did I think before? What do I think now? But if we can then add on to that, this meta-linguistic awareness, which is thinking about my language, what do I know about language? Then it puts the power back in, puts the student in the driver's seat of pulling apart what they know and then putting it into applying it in other places.
Huge. It's a huge key. And it would be something that would be so great if we could start next academic year. By the way, Anna and I are recording right now, and it's like June. We're getting ready for the end of the school year. And so we're really thinking about like, over summer, what are our goals over summer? What could we do? And I think that that's one of the things, right? Like as educators, how could we bring this power of transfer and metalinguistic awareness to the front of our classrooms next year?
Right. And where's the value, right? Like, yes, it's another thing to think about, but if I am in a dual language setting, if I'm a dual language principal or a dual language teacher, then I need to say, this is so valuable teaching this tool, because really, like Alexandra said, it's going to allow me to not have two separate curriculum, how to teach things two times in one language and then in the other language, but really thinking about how do I layer, and then within that layer of the dual language of the two curriculum, within that layering is the metalinguistic awareness, is the transfer that actually frees up my time. And if I'm in a monolingual setting, it's, well, I don't teach in maybe the student's primary language, but what can I do to help layer or transfer what they know in the primary language, or what conversations they've had in my class, and then how it moves over, as she was saying, as they language those conversations.
So that makes me think about two things that I think we heard both Nicole and Alexandra talk about. The first thing is this idea that we have to constantly position ourselves as learners. That we have to constantly be learning ourselves. And so I think that like you said, it's maybe a new thing, but like the value of it. And I think that we have to recognize the value of our own learning in our own classrooms. The other piece that it really makes me think about, that again, both of them talked about, was about changing our communication and our supports for our parents and our families. And I think that this is this is a key piece, right? That part of this transfer is about building up our L1, like our primary language, right? And so like, I think that message needs to get to our parents. I think sometimes that our parents think like, oh, I have to teach my children how to read English, and I don't know how to read English. And no, we really work on your primary language, like read with your students in the primary language, read to them, tell stories. We've heard that so many people. I think about Susanna talking about like the storytelling aspect, and like that all of these pieces are so important because it leads to that transfer.
Right. So I think if we pull that concept of transfer forward, if we really focus on, and as classroom teachers, as administrators, if we develop our own comfort in what is meta-linguistic awareness and how does that lead to transfer, if we lead with that, then we can speak to it and speak to the power of it when we're having conversations with students, with families, rather than trying to convince somebody of our beliefs. But like what Alexandra is saying, right, about like going back to how the brain works and what does this new research tell us? So we're going to use the science to lead those conversations. I think for families is not only, of course, valuing those stories, valuing the primary language, valuing the experiences, and coming from an assets-based perspective, but it's based on science. It's not just based on what I believe in my core is right, which, is validating for those of us who have those beliefs already. But it is really profound that now we are just seeing this amazing research that confirms those beliefs that we have.
And part of that confirming the beliefs, It makes me think of like a common thread of Nicole and how she kept talking about we have to have an assets-based school, an assets-based mindset. And I mean, we know historically schooling has been a subtractive mindset. Like, let's take away all of these habits that our students have and now we're like, no. Let's embrace all of the gifts that they're bringing to our classroom. Let's have an additive schooling where we're adding on to them, not taking things away from them. And so I think that that's one of the big things that's running through my head. And with that, I have to talk about the assessment systems. I think it's so important to talk about our assessment right now, especially because like here in the state of California, we're seeing some legislation, some language in the budget about like kind of a mandated assessment, a universal assessment screener looking for reading difficulties. And yeah, we should look for reading difficulties, but let's think about that assessment. Let's think about like, is that a valid assessment or is that just perpetuating our English only system, like our English only system that's a subtractive system? Like Alexandra and Nicole talked about this idea that when we have English only assessments, we're really hurting our students. We're not looking at everything that they're bringing to us, and we aren't getting a full picture of what our students are succeeding in. And like Alexandra talked about, looking at the assessment side by side, looking at a primary language assessment and an English assessment to see where are the gaps, where are the strengths, and they're not always going to be perfectly lined up. And we also heard from both of them the idea of like, we can't just have an English assessment that's translated into another language. We need to have those assessments built in primary languages and beyond English. And so they're really assessing pieces. And I think that that's something that's so important to us as educators to constantly be asking whomever we're reporting to, where is the multilingual assessment?
I agree. And you and I talked a little bit about this before we started recording, and Victoria has a lens from a district level, from a county level in the work that she does. Whereas my lens, of course, is a little more granular because I'm at the site. I'm in the middle of the assessments, right? In California, we just finished our state testing, which at my site, it's all in English. And so the question that we have is, okay, so what do we do at all of our levels? We have lots of listeners from different experiences and different positions. And so from all of those positions, how do we then keep that? What do we do? Right? If we all believe that coming from an assets-based perspective, then we need to have multilingual assessments that really give us a clear picture of who that student is. Because when I give monolingual assessment to a multilingual learner, then I don't have a clear picture of what that student actually can do. So then what do we do as advocates and of people in different positions to make sure that those conversations are being had? And so I think that sometimes we feel, that our impact might not be as great as we wish it could be, but collectively, I think our voices are heard. And as we start making decisions, like Victoria was saying, we know that these conversations are being had at the legislative level. Then what can we do? How do we get those conversations? If I'm a classroom teacher, then yeah, I should absolutely be talking to my principal and saying, okay, I understand this new assessment system, but let's not forget, what about the multilingual learners and how are we getting a clear picture? Because if we're using assessment to drive instruction, then we need an assessment that tells us what our students really have and where we need to take their instruction.
Absolutely. And like, I think that we constantly have to be that voice, right? We constantly have to be asking, where is the other assessment? Where is the companion assessment to this English only assessment? And I think that we ask that at multiple levels, right? If we are so inclined, we write our state legislators, right? We write to people, we testify at state decisions. And by the way, right now, and especially like one of the big benefits, the silver linings of the pandemic and the closures, is that like state legislator right now is really accepting Zoom testimony, phone call testimony. So there's lots of opportunities that you could testify directly from your classroom. Right. But we need to make sure that our voices are being heard, that we are really the advocates for our students, that we don't want, again, to continue this perpetual subtractive schooling that we've had. We want to make sure that we are an assets-based schooling system, that we are looking at everything and that we're getting that full picture of what our students know. And in order to do that, we have to have multilingual assessments. We have to have people that are able to look at those assessments and really talk about them. Alexandra said side by side, right? Mm-hmm. What's happening in English, what's happening in our primary language or our other languages as we speak, right? We need to make sure that we're giving our students all of the credit and we're getting that full picture so we know exactly what our students need and how to customize teaching. I think with all of our guests, we've heard that it's about knowing our students mm-hmm. and really giving them what they need in that classroom. And that's effective literacy.
I agree with you, Victoria. I think knowing our students is probably one of the themes of our entire season, right? As we're wrapping up our season and we're thinking about what are our big takeaways, what are the episodes that we're going to go back and listen to as we re-listen to episodes this summer? And you and I were talking about, okay, which ones you're going to listen to first? When are you going to go back for? And I think we're going to hear that over and over. Oracy was a big one. Oracy was a huge theme, but I also think knowing your students was probably one of the biggest that we heard in every single one of our episodes. And if we don't know our students and know what they know, then it makes it really hard for us as classroom teachers or as district level educators to think about, then how do we know what we should give them? How do we know what we should teach them? Or where do we go next in their language journey or in their literacy journey if we don't know what they know and we don't know who they are?
Right. And I also know that it's a big ask, right? It's a big ask that we as educators, but it's also a big gift. I'm going to just say that it's a big gift that we as educators aren't just copy and paste people, that we don't just open up a curriculum, move to day 20, do whatever it says on day 20, that we have to know our students. We have to develop the artistry. We have to have the science of education behind us, that we can't just copy and paste from classroom to classroom because our students are constantly different. We're constantly learning different things, and we want to make sure that we're doing what's best for those kiddos that are in our room.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really empowering also to the classroom teacher, because we're all classroom teachers as a result of a bachelor's degree, a credential, student teaching, master's degrees. We have a lot of education behind us that gives us the knowledge. And then we have these years of experiences or these colleagues across the hallway who have been doing it for many years successfully. We have the tools that we need in order to empower ourselves to make those decisions. And I think we also need to trust ourselves to make those decisions rather than spend our time, like you said, like, okay, I'm on day 20. Let me just get going. Let me make these copies, but really just take a beat, take a breath and think, who are my kiddos? And is this really going to move them forward to the next place that they need to be? As I'm browsing TPT, as I'm looking for outside resources, right? Are those resources going to help me? Or is there something that I can think about when I think about what that one specific learner or that group of students that I'm going to have in small group next week that will really help them move to the next level in their literacy development, whether that's comprehension, whether that's writing. And maybe it's not what's right in front of me. Maybe it is. But really giving the teacher the power to think about, who are my students? What do I know as the educator? And so how do I take those pieces, put them together, and use them to move kids forward?
Yeah, and you made me think about like this whole piece of, in my work lately, I've been hearing a lot of top-down decisions about like, oh, just work with these three strategies. These three strategies will get you everywhere. And we have to remember, as the educators that we are, that a strategy for strategy's sake isn't going to get us anywhere. Right. That we need to understand when to use that strategy and when not to, and why we're using that strategy. And so we need to apply the pedagogy with the strategy, that the strategy itself isn't going to move us.
Right. Well, it's going to move somebody, but that person may not be in your class, right? Or it might not be for that specific task. Right. So having those strategies are great, but you have to know why you're using them and who you're using them for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Anna, we're at the end of season 1. I can't believe that we made it.
Woo!
20 episodes, 11 guests, 5 of these making meaning episodes. Like, I love them. I love us getting to process and getting to really talk through what we've learned and kind of think about it.
Thinking about our thinking. A little metacognition for ourselves.
There you go, Anna, making those connections.
As Victoria said, that is, we're wrapping up our first season, and it's been really exciting. And if you've been listening to us from the beginning, thank you so much for going with us on this really incredible journey that we've had ourselves. We'd love to hear your feedback. What have you learned? What is your great takeaway? This has really been a really big honor to be a part of this. And we're looking forward to coming back together after a little break, I think that we all need, right? That we're coming up at the end of the school year. We're all going to take a break for the summer, and then we're going to come back together and have some new episodes to share probably around mid-August. Thanks so much for joining us in these 20 episodes of learning together, of making meaning together, and really hearing from the experts. It's really been awesome. We are the Effective Literacy Podcast. If you want more information or you want resources that we've talked about today or on previous episodes, you can always visit our show notes at the multilingualliteracy.org, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast and hopefully go back and listen to your favorite episodes over the summer.
All right. Have a good summer break.